Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how I made this mosaic look design using polymer clay. For this project you will need polymer clay in whatever color you choose, a sheet of paper and scissors, a pasta machine to flatten your clay, or if you don't have one, a rolling pin, a craft knife, a long flat clay knife like this, a circle cutter, a clay tool with an end like this, a sanding tool such as a Dremel, acetone, Sculpey oven baked clay adhesive, also known as Sculpey Bacon Bond, a tile to work on as your surface. This can be any ceramic tile. This is just a tile that I had left over from when I retiled my kitchen a couple of years ago, and there is a reason for using this that I'll explain a little bit later on. And a gloss sealing spray, which is optional depending on what kind of finish you want. Okay, so the very first thing that you are going to do is you're actually going to draw up your design. So I've just done this on my iPad in Procreate, but if you don't have a tablet and if you don't have Procreate, that is fine. You can just draw it straight onto a piece of paper, because once we are finished drawing this design up anyway, we need to print it out. So once you're finished drawing your design, go ahead and print it out and cut it out. But when you print it out, you need to print it the exact same size as what you want the finished result to be. Also, this design does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be roughly what you would like the finished result to be dimension wise, because this is going to act as a guide when you are making the piece. So just put your design to the side for now. We're going to start out by making the tiny little polymer clay pieces or tiles for the mosaic. So this is where it's important to be working on a surface such as a tile that you can just put straight in the oven. Because these pieces are going to be so thin and so tiny, you don't want to be picking them up and moving them around. You just want to be making them on this tile as a surface and then put the tile straight into the oven to bake it. That way you're not squashing and distorting any of your pieces. I am beginning with the white pieces, which are the petals of the flower. Roll out a thin piece of clay, but not so thin that it's going to get distorted while you're cutting it, but you really don't want this to be too thick. Now, in order to get the dimensions right, take your design and place it directly onto the piece of clay. Then you need to take a tool and gently make a dent on the clay through the paper on the top and the bottom of one of the petals. When you take the paper away, you will see the dents in the clay, and now you know how big the petal needs to be. Excuse the dust and dirt in this clay. I will be cleaning out later, and if you have ever worked with white clay, you will know how it is. Now, just using those dents as a guide, cut out your petals. I'm making quite a lot of these, so I did heaps. The reason I'm doing these freehand and not using some sort of cutter is because I like them to look a little bit different and have some sort of variation. I feel like it makes it look a little bit more authentically like a mosaic, because when mosaics are getting done and tiles are getting cut, they're not all cut the exact same size and shape. All right, moving on. Now we're doing the center of the flower. As you can see, I used my draft for a guide again to make sure I was cutting it the right size. Also, just a little side note here, my fingernails are not dirty. They have blue hair dye under them. It's like impossible to get out. Now just continue the process for all parts of your mosaic. And just remember, wherever you cut these pieces out on the tile, you're going to leave them there. Don't try and move them around or pick them up, because they're such small pieces and so thin. If you try and take them off the tile, they will probably become distorted, stretched, crumpled up. So it's best to just leave them exactly where they are and bake the whole tile. As you can see here, for the background sections of my mosaic, so the grass and the sky, I've just laid a big square of clay and I'm just cutting it up with the clay knife, because these sections don't need to be a specific shape like the petals of the flower. I also dipped my knife in a little bit of cornstarch. I'm sorry, I forgot to put that on the materials needed. I don't usually use it, but the clay can stick to the knife and it does help a little bit with that. As you can see with the blue, it still picked up a few pieces from the knife stick, but don't worry about it, this doesn't need to be perfect. The butterflies were a little bit more tricky to get the dimensions right, just because I had made them so small. So here I actually ended up cutting them slightly bigger than I had drawn them originally. Here I'm just cutting out the little black details for the butterflies, which were even smaller. Just be mindful when you're doing your design that you don't make parts that are too small, because it does get tricky. Here are all my finished parts on the tile ready to go in the oven. As I said before, I'm just going to be picking up this entire tile and putting the whole thing in the oven. I'm not going to tell you what temperature to bake it at. Just follow the instructions on your clay, because all the clays have different baking temperatures. And no matter what temperature you're baking at, the tile will be able to withstand the heat, because polymer clay bakes at a relatively low temperature. After baking, the clay will be a little bit stuck to the tile, so I'm just going to use that clay knife to gently lift it off. Now, when we get to the big blue square and the big green square, as you can see, it all kind of came off in one piece. You should be able to just break most of the larger pieces up with your hands, but you will probably have to recut some of the smaller pieces with the craft knife using the lines that you had already cut as a guide. There's really no easy way to do this. It is tedious and time consuming. You're either going to be cutting the pieces one by one before you bake it, or you're going to be doing what I'm doing here, cutting them after it's baked. All right, so next get the color that you want to use for your background. This is just a light gray that I blended up, but honestly, use whatever color you want. I reckon in this mosaic style, even a black background would look really cool depending on the design, but I felt like for this specific design, a light color was the way to go. So this is my cutter that I'm going to be using. It's actually the same size as the design that I printed out. So if you are able to do that and you can print the design in the same size as the cutter that you have, that would be really good. But if you haven't done that, it's fine, because you can just put the design down on the clay and use it as a stencil and hand cut the circle or whatever shape you're doing. I do that all the time when I don't have the right cutter that I need. Okay, now go right ahead and cut your circles. I'm doing a few because I'm making a bunch of earrings with this design. Now we've done all the preparation and we actually get to do the fun part, which is making the mosaic. Get all your little bits and bobs together and I'll show you what I did. Get a tiny little piece of clay like this and get your clay tool. You're just going to wrap this little piece of clay around the end of your clay tool like so, and it should look like this. Basically, this is just going to help you pick up the pieces because, you know, the uncooked clay is a little bit sticky and it'll stick to the pieces of cooked clay. Now, to figure out the placement of the pieces, you're going to do something similar to what we did before and place the paper design on top of your piece of clay. Then I just made a little dent on the center of the yellow piece of the flower. That's all I really need to figure out the placement of the rest. It's just so I have a starting point to work around. But if you wanted to dot out multiple pieces or every piece, that's totally up to you. This is just how I do it. All right, now we're ready. We're ready to go. It is time to finally make this thing. With each piece that you put down, make sure you apply a little bit of pressure because you want it to really be firmly stuck in. I don't push it down to the point where it's completely flat because I don't want it to be stuck in that far, but I do want it to be slightly embedded into the clay so that it has a little bit of grip onto the piece. Pushing it down into the clay like that will distort the circle. It will not be perfectly round anymore. However, fear not. I'm going to help you deal with that afterwards, so don't worry about it. And also don't worry about the pieces overhanging the edge of the circle. I'm also going to be dealing with that after. As you can see, mine are hanging out all over the place. Once I finished, I went over it with a rolling pin, just with a light amount of pressure because I wanted to try and make sure all the pieces were pushed in the same amount. Like I kind of want the pieces to all be a similar height as best as I possibly can do that. And here is just a closer look at it after I've done all of that. Oh, also I didn't mention it, but that paper that I'm working on is just baking paper. Next, you're going to gently remove it from the baking paper. Just be careful, especially if you've rolled over it with a rolling pin. Sometimes it can really stick to the paper. And then flip it over. Take the cutter that you used and then lightly press it into the clay to make a slight indent on the back. And if you didn't use a cutter, use your draft, place it over it and just draw around it with a clay tool to make a light indent. It should look a little something like this, and this is going to be a guide for after you bake the clay on where to sand to get that perfect circle again. Now it is ready to bake, so bake it. Alright, so I've just pulled these out of the oven now and we're going to be cleaning up the edges and making them back into a perfect circle. The first thing we want to do is deal with these little overhanging pieces. Just get your craft knife and cut those off. Next up, we are going to be using our Dremel or whatever sanding tool you use. But first and most importantly, make sure you are wearing a dust mask every time you sand because you don't want to be breathing in the dust. Now get sanding to smooth that edge off. You're going to be sanding quite a lot. We're going to be sanding right down to where that line is that we made on the back of the piece. Just go slow, little by little. You can always sand more off, but you can't put it back on once you've already sanded it. Now, once you're done and you've sanded all the way up to that line, it should be a perfect circle again. Here's a little comparison just to show you. The one on the left is the one that I just sanded, and the one on the right, which is clearly misshapen, not a perfect circle, is one that is just fresh out of the oven and unsanded. And here is the back. You should not see that indent line that you made in the clay at all. Now here is a problem that you may come across with the sanding. As you can see down the bottom here, a tiny little piece of the color got flicked out by the Dremel. And there's another one at the top of this one here. This is a pretty easy fix, it's just annoying. I'm just going to cut a tiny little piece of the color out of the clay and put it in the gap. And to help that little piece of clay stick on, because it's so teeny tiny, I'm going to put a little bit of Sculpey oven baked clay adhesive on. Then just wedge that little piece of clay on, make sure you're happy with the way it looks, and then bake it again. Once you are happy with the way your pieces look and they are all baked, it is time to clean out the dust and dirt with a little bit of acetone. Just get a little bit of acetone on a cotton tip and wipe it over any pieces of dust and dirt that don't just flick away with your hand. Just be mindful not to use too much acetone or wipe over the same spot too many times, because the acetone does eat away at the clay and you don't want to be left with big gouges out of your clay. So do use it, but use it sparingly. It's kind of hard to pick up on the camera, but it really does make a huge difference. The one on the left is before the acetone and the one on the right is after. You can see all the bits of dirt on the one on the left. Some of the surfaces are a little bit bumpy, and it's even just good for getting rid of all of that dust from sanding. Oh, and I can see now, I forgot to mention, I'm using these as earrings. So as you can see, I have drilled a hole through the top of each one for hanging them. Finally, we are applying our gloss sealer. This is optional, of course. Please don't just use any old sealer, only use one that you know works well on polymer clay. Test it first. Don't just go putting any sealer willy-nilly on your piece that you've spent hours on. This one's amazing. You can buy it at Bunnings if you're Australian. I love it. But some sealers, they don't fully dry and they leave it tacky. You don't want that. And there we have it. You are done. Here are my finished pieces. As I said, I was making them into earrings, so this is them as earrings. I hope this tutorial helped. Have fun with it. Do different designs. If you have any questions for me, leave them down below and I will do my best to answer them. And let me know if you have any suggestions for other tutorials I should make. Thanks for watching. Bye!